Good afternoon, and thank you very much to my audience for listening. And today is going to be my part where I want to reflect how passionate I am towards the profession I practice. I'm talking about dentistry as well as dental sleep medicine, and how many things I observe through the years of my clinical practice, and how I apply those lessons and make a parallel with evolution of creatures who live on the planet. And I think about my field not only during my working hours, but also when I'm traveling. And I really like to study. I'm very passionate about diversity and anthropology, and my two medical school backgrounds really helped me. Those fundamental knowledge that I got in my first medical school in Russia helped me to make a lot of observation and maybe find some clue or be purely scientific, I hope, in my observation. So today I want to talk about my experience and evolutionary trends, what I noticed in Galapagos Island. I'm talking about adaptability, and important adaptability in evolution, natural selection, and genetic variation. But in my world, what I see every day, and I hope this lecture will resonate with my patients, because I preach the same principles every day. And if you medical professionals, I hope my philosophy resonates with you and you can connect the dots. So I live in the world and I observe what a lot of people struggle with every breath. And also they don't look at the sleep as a restful period, but they look at that like a battleground. And I think that's the sign of evolution, and we have to be really careful. So my journey was inspired by Galapagos Island. The different forces of adaptation shape the diversity of species over the centuries. And also, I want to talk about story what shape my life, and how I apply that to everyday practice. So I want to introduce you to my friend. Let's call him Eugene. And his story, very tragic, but in the same time, previous story is very typical. His ex-wife complained about snoring, and he suffered from sleep apnea, irregular heartbeat, battles with the high blood pressure, acid reflux. And one night he fell asleep and didn't wake up in the morning. My close friend for so many years died from cardiac arrest due to the sleep apnea episode. And that's why I look at my role in the life of my patient as very noble. I help them sleep and breathe in the same time. And when people ask me what I do, and I said to them, I'm a dentist and I help people sleep and breathe in the same time, they have some negative connotation. But truth is, what dentists, and especially orthodontists, set the foundation of a good sleep and breathing for the lifetime. And when I look through the evolutionary history, I observe changes in the facial growth and development, and I'm going to help you to understand it from my eyes. And I think Galapagos Island, my experience on a Galapagos Island, can be a great example. So let me start my story. What Galapagos Island is the remote islands which formed due to volcanic activity recently. We're talking about several million years ago. And all the species, animal, birds, and reptiles arrived to those islands and form unique ecosystem. And that's really essence of evolution. And Charles Darwin also noticed that as well. And I want to start with adaptability. We can adapt to our changes as well as creatures around us. And Charles Darwin talked about very famously about Darwin finches. And even though those finches look so different, they also have the same ancestor. And the example of adaptability Charles Darwin mentioned, he brought our attention to the beak. The finch on the right have a short beak, and finch on the left have a long beak. It's developed due to the food they found on specific island. If island has a big seeds, finch has a small beak. And if island has a tiny seeds and it's hard to reach, then finch has a long beak. And that helped them to utilize available food resources. But I want to bring two examples of development, what happened with us over the century. As a famous orthodontist John Mew mentioned, we have now melting of the human face, like somebody hold candle next to the face. Face gets smaller and retruded, like face is melted. Historically, our ancestor diet consists of the coarse and tough food. And they have to exert a great pressure to chew, and the muscle develop. And that, develop robust jaw, like you see on the right. But now, with the decrease of breastfeeding and reliance on a bottle feeding, totally different forces play a role. And it's required different tongue efforts and different facial movement. And that's, of course, affect growth and development. And also, another wonderful thing happened. We really like soft food, this adorable puree from fruits and vegetables. And we don't have to chew so hard. And it's also a reduction of mechanical aspect on the jaw. And change diet over the time led to gradual adaptation of human facial structure. And I want to talk about adaptability, not always have a positive effect, but it's still adaptability. I think smaller jaw lead to crowding and malocclusion, and that's why we have so many wisdom teeth extraction and a lot of braces. Next topic, I want to talk about creatures I met on Galapagos Island, and they call marine iguana. And I really was impressed with law of natural selection. So you can see on a picture marine iguana, and it's black, but this iguana was actually drifted to Galapagos Island, and they are, originally iguana live on the land, but due to the unique features, they adapt to the environment, and the species what survive, they have ability. They learn how to swim and eat algae underwater. And those individuals, they have a streamlined bodies, and they are great swimmers, and they can eat underwater and make really breathe really slowly, maybe like one breath per hour. And this way it helped them to survive. And of course, finding natural selection among human race, it's really hard. But recently we have that tragic event called COVID-19 pandemic, and that provide unique lens on the natural selection. And I found this article, they compare effect COVID-19 on nose breathers and mouth breathers. And in that article, they mentioned people who breathe through the nose, they lost sense of smell, and in the same time, the symptoms was much lighter. That was like a respiratory tract infection, comparing to people who breathe through the mouth and get the virus straight to the lungs and trachea, and they have much more serious life-threatening complication. And I think it's really alarming, and that's why I observed the same thing with my patients, and some of them actually tragically lost their life, unfortunately. And particularly a lot of people who suffer from sleep apnea, they breathe through the mouth, and the complications and effect on them of COVID-19 was tremendous. And some still recovering from that. And that's why I'm so passionate about my myofunctional therapy department, what we have in our practice, what we devote a lot of time explaining patients why it's so important to breathe through the nose, but not through the mouth. Also, I observe, it's also from my practice, from the trenches, what a lot of people who breathe through the mouth, they have a lot of chronic illnesses. And it's fascinating and concerning at the same time, over the years, I practiced for 20 years, I see the medical histories just get richer and richer, and the amount of medication they take and the effect from those medications, very concerning. And I also have another article. In this article, it's actually illustrate the same topic. People who breathe through the mouth, they have a different microbiome. The different species of bacteria resides, in the human body. Some of them are really useful. They help us to digest the food, but some of them can lead to chronic illnesses. And I think that's the sign of natural selection. So nose breathing, I think that's a really positive trend. And, I really encourage you to breathe through the nose. And I notice also people who breathe through the mouth, they have a little bit different look. On this picture, you can observe the person who breathes through the mouth has a retruded jaw and dark circle under the eyes, underdeveloped mid face due to the wrong tongue position on the floor of the mouth. And the person who breathes through the nose has much more developed organically or more beautiful face according to our standards. And I think they have a healthier life. And third topic I want to talk about, it's called genetic variation. And that's, I'm very passionate about genetics and how genes express themselves under certain circumstances. And I want to illustrate my topic with this wonderful animal called Galapagos tortoise. Tortoise, actually. The arrival tortoise on Galapagos occurred through natural circumstances. Tortoise have ability to float in the water, and they are swimmers, but they can float. They have a special space next to the kidney where they can store supplies and survive for a year. So they can float for a year. They actually have the same ancestors, and they float from South America, which is really 650 kilometers away from Galapagos. So they drifted, but I was really amazed to notice how different the shape of those tortoises and how differently the genes express themselves to help them to survive on the different islands. I noticed some tortoise has a very saddle shape, and that helped them to walk through the island and find a different vegetation. And some tortoise, they have a dome shape, and that helped them to stretch the neck and eat low vegetation. So the different genes adapt to a different environment. And I want to bring the example from my practice. A lot of people who come to me, they said, I have a sleep apnea and my parents sleep with the CPAP machine. And yes, I understand we have some genetic predisposition to sleep and breathing disorders, but what makes me concerned, what it also applies to future generations, what's going to follow. I understand the genetic inclination, but I think as a parent, we want to create an environment where our kids would be healthier than us. And I always emphasize to take proactive measures from early age to break that cycle, to prevent future complication. And I agree that it's not easy, but parents don't have a proper education. Pediatricians just simply don't have time to educate about breathing and a tongue position. And ENT evaluation with tonsils and adenoids also create a lot of controversy, remove adenoids or not to remove adenoids. But I would like to offer some practical recommendations. Sleeping with the CPAP machine and give that legacy to your kids, maybe we can go to different direction. And what I recommend to start, with capturing your child sleeping from the waist up, we video with the visible movement of the chest and of course the mouth and the sound. And then to bring that visual information to the doctor or pediatric dentist for comprehensive evaluation. And I would like to encourage you to be attentive to such signs as a mouth breathing and excessive respiration and restlessness. Noisy respiration is not a good sign. And also, I suggest you to take a moment to reflect on your own sleep and breathing habits. Maybe this snoring and fatigue, maybe that's a whisper from evolution. And did you ever wonder if your sleep as restorative as it can be? And if you experience that fatigue in the morning and a headache and a restless night, maybe this video can encourage you to take some action. And I hope understanding those genetic tendencies create, ring the bell. And maybe that's going to be important for entire human race, because we do have ability positively impact our future. But in the same time, I wish you good night's sleep next to the loved one, snore free, nudge free, full of dreams, just like you always dream of. Thank you very much for your attention. I really appreciate your support. And if you leave the comments underneath the video, I highly appreciate that.